Hello, my name is Leianne Lamb, and I'm with Contemporary Asian Theater Scene. It is my pleasure today to sit down with the artist, poet, educator, Flo Oy Wong. We're here with Flo to understand a little bit about her illustrious career and understand how she can provide advice on what it's like to be an Asian American woman artist. Flo is also the focus of a beautiful film called um, Drawn from Life, The Creative Legacy of Flo Oy Wong. Flo, I hand it to you. Flo, what inspired you to become an artist?
And I'm on the chat, but what inspired you to become an artist? I think that for me, being a child of Oakland Chinatown, I was immersed in a community that was very colorful in spite of the challenges of being a child of immigrants from China. Chinatown in Oakland, California was a very colorful place for me. There were a lot of sounds. There was the feeling of the hustle bustle. And during the holidays, especially the Lunar New Year, I would see even more colors because at the street corners, the vendors were selling different color azaleas, and all kinds of other natural scenery to go along with the concept of the Lunar New Year. When the lion dancers came, then my color palette expanded and exploded. And I just stood there and walked around and just um found myself pulled into the world of the drums, the world of the lion dancers, the world of the firecrackers, and just watching the red firecrackers explode and scatter like confetti. I just took it all in. And then, we had a family restaurant and it was very colorful for the simple reason there were orange Formica counters in our restaurant. We had customers from the nearby Salvation Army and the lonely and the dispossessed men who came to eat all had some kind of a character that they brought in with them. And many times, it was through their saggy faces. And it all started in Chinatown, where I saw color and shape and size and design and sound and everything. A defining moment in my artistic journey. It was when I was 75 years old. I had been an artist since I was 40. And at the time of turning 75, I had the opportunity to work as an artist in residence at Rooftop School in San Francisco. And I worked with Andy Wong, who was on staff there. Andy is a teacher. She is an artist. She is an organizer. And um, just being there with children whose goal during the day was to learn about art and to make art and to produce art and art, I mean, all the disciplines of the art world. The children they opened their hearts and they were so receptive to whatever I came in to teach, but at the same time, I was inspired by Andy and her understanding of where art belongs in our families. And that was very critical and important, especially for Asian Pacific American students, because most of us came from immigrants who were very conservative, and labor was a big issue in their lives, and working and staying together as tight families, but not so much being the makers of art themselves, even though the parents, when they had a chance, enjoyed Chinese opera. They loved, the other festivities that went on. But because they were of the working class, they just, they didn't have time to do what I, as a descendant of the working class, had time to do. I could, be influenced and then try to express myself. Um, so when I started working with Leianne at the rooftop school, and this was courtesy of a collaboration between Kearney Street Workshop and also Rooftop. Um, I was like a kid in a candy store, and here I was, an older person. And I love the contrast of me being the elder teacher and working with these students who were ready to accept and transform the stimuli that they had in a creative way. What challenges did I face pursuing a career in the arts? When I had known all along from the age of 9 that I was a creative person. I heard music when I was 9 years old. I fell in love with vocabulary words when I was 9 years old. And I was always longing for um, a break from the very challenging, hard laboring life as a daughter of 2 immigrant parents who ran a restaurant. And everything was focused about our restaurant. We lived a block away in a Victorian, a very dramatic, uh, just sometimes a eerie Victorian. Um, and that was so different from the reality of our lives that were happening inside of the restaurant, where we had an expanded family of workers, and these men were known as the Hlandoi, and we adopted them into our family because they were here in America without their wives, their children, their families. And so I started dreaming when I was 9. And so you know, I decided to follow the traditional way that was available for young Asian American women. I fell in love. I went to the University of California, Berkeley, and I was ready to just um, embrace myself into a life of family. My father loved family. My mother loved family. And so I was ready to carry on to the family mode, not knowing that what I carried within me was an intention to have an identity of myself, not as a daughter, not as a sister, not as a mother, a grandmother, but as a person who had thoughts of my own, who understood sometimes the trauma that I went through, who who belonged to a group, but I felt like I was an outsider and I didn't understand why I was an outsider. It was a combination of the complexity of being and of seeking. And so I loved it when I went to Lincoln's elementary school and read the weekly reader and saw that there were questions about family and parents. And I recall writing and saying on the back of the weekly reader itself that I wanted my parents to have a moment of joy, to have a moment of relaxation. And sometimes that happens and sometimes they didn't. But I saw how they suffered. And I saw that um, there was something good that was coming from the suffering, not necessarily for them, but a good that was happening for those of us who were the children who had to work long hours also. And so it was this complexity of being in a box, and the box was there because we spoke Chinese, and I spoke my ancestral Hawaiian with my family, with my parents. And then when I went to Lincoln School, I spoke English. And then when I went to Chinese school after the restaurant, I spoke Cantonese, Samye, and Samye is Hawaiian. And so in Cantonese, it would be Samye. And then on Saturdays, I spoke Mandarin because we had Mandarin lessons on Saturdays. And so, what I'm describing might sound like a hodgepodge. Maybe it was, but it was certainly complex. And I was entering one world and into another world, even though culturally it was within, a Chinese framework. And I had to change personalities quite often. And then as a young child, I went to a church and I joined the church when I was 10 years old. So throw into my Chinese Chinatown conservative upbringing, I also on my own chose to have a religious exposure. And so, out of all of that, who and what was I? And where did I truly belong? Because at home in the restaurant, my sisters, my brother, and I all followed what our parents decided for us. Um, we would ask questions, but we were told that we had to be quiet and not ask questions. And so, I didn't really know where I belonged in all these different categories. And so I without knowing it, conscientiously, I had already been in a world of inquiry, like who in the daylights, am I? What would I do? And I carried those questions into my life as a elementary school teacher, a visual arts specialist, as a mother dedicated to my two children. And the one thing that I always did was I always wanted to be present when my children came home so that we could have conversations, and after they would have a snack and talk to me, then we would all go on our separate ways. I wanted to know them. I wanted them to know that I was there for them. But when they went to their, soccer games or practices or piano lessons or anything, I took time to figure out, besides taking naps because I was so tired, what was I going to do besides, providing for them and providing for Ed, my husband? What was I providing for myself? And I loved words. I was very good and still am very good with words. And I started pursuing this attempt to write poetry, and I went in and out of writing poetry. And at the University of California, I happened to have had a professor who was retiring. I was taking a classical poetry class from him. And for me, his spirit was not in his teaching, as I said, he was retiring, and he droned, and I couldn't get motivated. And then we took our class took an exam, and like 98% of us failed. And he was so disappointed although there were, 2% of the students who did understand what he was drawing, I went, oh, if he's going to make, classical English poetry sound so dead, I'm not going to pursue it. I didn't know how to stand up for myself at that time. I was so green. I came from, a Chinese flavored Chinatown. My people were people impacted by the 1882 exclusion law. And here I was in a very Western concept of freedom and questioning. And I didn't know how to question because we weren't allowed to question at home. I was in a church where it was not necessarily safe to question unless, I accepted the leadership of those who were interpreting the words of God. And I didn't know if God was a man or a woman, I had no idea. And it was just all that confusion. So, uh, you know, and I didn't know that I was looking for a path as an artist. I just knew that I was searching.
Flo,
Um,
that's amazing. That's amazing, Flo. Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you.
Excellent. Now, when you started your visual art and as your poetry, what was there any particular challenges that you faced moving into this career as an artist?
Yes. I didn't tell my parents that I was doing this. I just did it. I went to Chinese school, and even in Chinese, my skills in Chinese were learning Chinese was very good. I wrote stories in a very creative way, and the teachers were so surprised that I wrote it from sometimes a place of fantasy, of questioning, even though uh, we were expected to learn and just recite. I just added my own little touches of joy. I added my own little touches of different things. And at Chinese school, I was exposed to some pretty wild, crazy Chinatown boys, and I loved what they did, the courage they had to do the things that they did. And one of them had taken a can that had a springing um, uh, snake that popped out when the lid was open. And he would bring it, and then when the teacher wasn't listening, he opened it, and then we just break out into giggles, and just laughter, and then out came the discipline. We were hit with a sahang, which is and I can't even remember the English word for it, but we got in trouble, and I like getting in trouble, but what happened was that after we got in trouble at school, then when we went home and the parents found out about what we did, we got in trouble even more. So I thought, is having fun rewarded in that negative way? Can't we have fun in a different kind of a way? And so I also was going between different languages. I'm hearing impaired now, but at the time I was growing up, I could hear the sounds and the nuances of the different dialects we were learning, the way to express ourselves and what words to use, and I learned swear words in Chinese and all of this, and it was such a mishmash. And out of that mishmash, I began to grow as an artist, but I didn't know I was an artist. I just knew that I was curious. And I was this kid putting my hands on the window, putting my nose up flat against the window, and wondering, did I belong inside of Chinatown or outside of Chinatown? And that is not something that I faced alone. A lot of those of us who are people of color, we're diverse. Our ancestors come from a very strong, history and culture. And who in the daylights am I in all of this mixture? And did I like the mixture? And do I want to stay in the mixture? And so how do I blend? How do I blend to become the authentic me? Who was the authentic me? Where was I? Was I hiding? Why was I hiding? You know, and it didn't just happen at that young age. I'm going to be 86 in October, and it still is with me. I keep asking questions, and and maybe it's because as a child, my siblings and I, were told not to ask questions. But the more we were told not to ask questions, I asked more questions. So it's the matter of being curious. And
Yes.
I didn't like what was happening in our culture and our family, in that boys were revered and honored and girls were not. The sexism was rampant. And I felt like I was tied with rope, and I wanted to break those ropes off desperately.
Well, you definitely did that, Flo. You are a true activist, and you've taught many people just the elements of being their self, trusting themselves, and using their voice, which I definitely thank you for.
Well, you're welcome. I wouldn't be alive if I didn't use my voice.
Mm, wonderful. Now, in all of this, you have founded a premier organization, Asian American Women Artists for as Artists Association, AWA, and you've done so much in creating your own art. I'm wondering what advice would you have for aspiring artists in terms of maybe skill development and self-assuredness.
Trust yourself. Trust yourself. If it comes from your intuitive center, and we have three dantins in our body, and the one I'm referring is the one that, a few inches below our navel. If we feel in that area this kind of um, uh, lostness, this kind of searching, this kind of um, longing and yearning for authenticity, for being our true selves, honor that. A lot of times we'll feel something and then we deny it. And I want to give you an example. When my children were in high school, I played tennis during the day, and I would sometimes play twice a day, and I loved it. I still had time to make dinner and take them to their piano lessons or whatever else. What happened was that I was playing a very competitive match, and I was unhappy with the people with whom was playing. And I said on the court to my late sister Leslie, who lived in Oakland at that time. And I just said quietly, Leslie, I'm going to come up on Saturday or Sunday and play tennis with you. I'm tired of playing with these people. I come home and I get a phone call, and it's my sister Leslie, and she says, "Come up to play with me on Saturday or Sunday." And I said, "I was just on the tennis court, and I thought that." And I said, "How did you know to call me to ask me to do that?" She said, "I heard you." And for me, this is what making art and being creative is that we have energy within ourselves. Sometimes we have the courage to acknowledge that and talk to ourselves. But by thinking that and feeling that, that energy travels with faith and trust. And whoever is simpatico is going to pick it up. And because my sisters and I were so close, quite often we knew what each other was thinking or feeling, and we didn't have to say anything. We already knew. And so, in becoming an artist, a visual artist at the age of 40. And I became a visual artist because after that University of California experience I had with the droning professor, I went like, well, maybe I don't really want to use words. Maybe I don't want to speak out in that way. And by becoming an artist, I didn't have to use words. I could use colors. I could use shape. I could use sizes. I could use this, my sense of design, you know. And another thing that happened to me as a child that really inspired me, and I don't know how to explain that except to tell everybody about it, is that the Oakland Museum was originally started in a Victorian at Lake Merritt. And this house was very, very beautiful. And I got so excited knowing that one day that early Oakland Museum would move and become a big, beautiful structure. And we waited for many years as funding came, as the city of Oakland got in and, and inspired and made it happen. But I just held on to that dream. And I had a lot of dreams because um, financially, we were working class. We had 7 children in the family. We were very poor. We had challenges in our family. Our father was not fatally shot in a dispute with a relative, and we didn't have any rights to eat, so the whole gamut of trauma just like sort of hit me in the face. And but my parents were so brave. One of the reasons my father decided that he wouldn't die was because he didn't yet have a son. And my mother was incredible. She held the family together. She was the one who made sure that there was food on the table. Relatives gave us bags of rice, and my mother's brother-in-law, our uncle Acha, brought sacks of rice and gave us money. We needed all the help we could get. The community in Chinatown rose to help save our family. And then lo and behold, in 1941, my brother Bill was born, which was just really wonderful. At last, my mother didn't have to suffer to go through another pregnancy, because if there was a girl born after me, she would still continue. And that was because of the pressure of the Confucius teaching and learning that men were the ones who counted. Men could be the poets, and men could be the administrators, and the women, and many of them in bound feet, had to stay home. And a lot of immigrants like my parents brought those ideas over. That said, my father had been in Oakland, Chinatown, as an earlier immigrant, and he learned the freedom of the American ways. And so he began to teach us how to be Americans, not white Americans, just Americans. And so, it's this like in and out, this back and forth, this push pull, And basically, I would say that the metaphor that I would use would be a fulcrum, a seesaw, where we're sitting on it, and sometimes we're up and sometimes we're down. But where was the middle for us to sit? And of course, we understand that life is impermanent. And so sometimes we would be up and sometimes we would be down. But there was a way to retain balance. And for me, I found that being an artist, even though I don't have a degree in art, I could find a sense of balance. And as a person struggling, I had the um, misguided notion that if something good was going to happen to me, that I would be there all the time. And then when reality hit me in the face and found that a true life is balance, out of balance, balance, out of balance. And so that philosophical thought just fed me. Um, I just was driven to see if it's possible at all that I could have any touches of balance.
Wow, thank you, Flo. These are amazing stories, and some such um wise and wisdom that you're sharing right now. So thank you. Yeah, Flo,
There's a
you.
question here that says, did you pursue formal education in your field or are you self-taught? When I went to the University of California, Berkeley, I had an art class that was designed for teachers to teach because we made our bulletin boards and sometimes we gave art lessons to our students. And so that was my first inkling of with a pen or pencil, whatever tool and supplies to make a visual representation. Although my real teachers in life were my late sister Lai and my brother Bill. My late sister Lai Webster went to Oakland Technical High School, where she, with her art talent, made posters for the dance parties that the school would have. And I still remember her drawing a poster, I think of Carmen Miranda in a wonderful dancing costume. And when I saw that, my mouth just hung open, not knowing how and where and what she was doing and how did it come, to her. I admired her a lot. And then my brother Bill, during World War II, our restaurant was so filled with so many customers, he had to sit obediently on sacks of rice. And a lot of times he sat at the counter drawing the most beautiful horses I've ever seen. And I just went in awe. I didn't know where it came from. Then when I was a graduate student at the University of California, ready to pursue my teaching credential, I ended up being working with a master teacher at a school in San Lorenzo. And she said that she gave me a big, huge poster board, and she wanted me to make a poster about science. And so I took that home and I decided my theme would be insects. And I ended up drawing a huge fly, and that was the background. And then on top of that, I wrote the science questions that we were presenting to the students that I was teaching as an apprentice teacher. So I put it up for the science lesson. My master teacher's in the classroom, and she says to me, well, who did the drawing? And I said, I did. I didn't know that I had skills that I could do that. I just found a picture of a fly and copied it.
That's beautiful.
And, she really appreciated the visual support I had for the science questions for the children to know and to possibly find answers to.
Thank you, Flo. Flo, can you hear me right now?
As far as my formal education in art, I was self-taught for the longest time. And then I did start taking classes at De Anza College in Cupertino and Foothill College in Los Altos Hills. I had marvelous instructors. I was the older woman who was a kid in the candy store. I loved my homework assignments. I loved whatever they were teaching us, introducing me to new materials and ideas and thoughts. And I wasn't used to exposure like that. It was wonderful. It was very good for me because I was quite, even as a middle-aged, still in a box. And I had no idea that I was ready to come out of the box. Or maybe I knew, but I didn't have the courage to come out of the box. And I still remember one assignment in a class at a Foothill. My teacher was Gordon Holler, a magnificent, magnificent art teacher. And he had a nude woman lying in a coffin. And we were supposed to draw that. And it was a macabre kind of a a setup, but I didn't question it. I was so focused on trying to get something on paper. And so what happened was that I didn't, it was so much that I didn't draw the whole thing. I drew a very specialized part of it because I knew that I could do something there in that area, but I wasn't confident in my skills to do what I did because, my skills were not so well developed, but I was able to make my pen and pencil move. And I was so into learning how to do contour work and everything else that I just did. There was a huge amount of trust that I had in myself. And that was a good test for me, because I was always surrounded by someone who was teaching me or guiding me. And very seldom did my answers come from me. But in that art class, my visual marks didn't come from Gordon Holler, say, Flo, put this line here, do the line. I just responded. It was my body was led by my eyes. And I had no idea that my eyes were perceptive. And I loved it because I didn't have to use words. I loved words, but I wasn't yet confident with words. And it took me a long time. I started my art career at the age of 40, and it was at 75, the age of 75, that I was willing to bite the bullet and see if I could be creative with words. And I didn't have any idea that I was being patient with myself, but I didn't want to go to heaven in the future and meet the art goddess or the total goddess, whoever I'm going to meet up there, and say that I didn't fulfill something that I really needed in order to be the authentic me.
Well, thank you, Flo. Flo, can you talk about the financial aspects of being an artist and the realities of that?
Yes, it's very expensive to be an artist. Um, I supported myself at the beginning of my art career because I was a school teacher. And so what I earmarked was my paychecks from teaching school to paying for my studio rent, for buying all my art supplies, for taking workshops, for going to museums and getting, an art education outside of the classroom. And my expenses grew. The studio that I rented from the city of Sunnyvale increased their prices. And I was ready then to say, okay, what I'll do is I will teach all day full time, do my art at night and on weekends, and bless my husband's art, bless my husband's generosity. Ed said, no. He said, you don't have to worry about the expense. It's making you happy to study art and to be an artist. So therefore, you go ahead and do what you want. I'll cover you in terms of expenses. So that just like it took a load off of my shoulders and I went ahead. But then I also learned about funding. Organizations and different agencies offer grants and they're competitive. So then I learned to, with the help of friends and a Kearney Street workshop in San Francisco, I applied for grants. And as a result of that, in my career as an artist, I received 3 National Endowment for the Arts Awards for work that I was doing. And I was so amazed that um, projects that I thought of and worked on with Nancy Hom receive these this funding. And then what happened? I started to learn that funding begets funding. So once somebody knew that I received funding from an agency, they would say, "Oh, in that case, I'll donate this much." And that happened with me in 2004 when I was one of the first non-Japanese American artists to show at the Japanese American Museum in San Jose. I had these wonderful, wonderful community leaders work with me, and we applied for a grant, and we asked for, I think, $25,000, and I think we received 10,000. And so one of the people working with me said, "Flo, we're going to return the grant because we really want 25,000, and we only got 10,000." And I said, "No, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and accept the 10,000." And I said, there will be people in the community who will want to contribute and help us build up to the funding that we need. And sure enough, we accepted the $10,000 under the auspices of the Japanese American Museum of San Jose. And the people in the community, when they discovered that I was going to tell their stories about what they took to camp during World War II, their internment time, people gave me amounts of, like, you know, just modest amounts to larger amounts. And they always knew another person that had a, a deep pocket, that had a generosity, that also longed to have their story of internment told. And it was a big trust on their part because I'm not Japanese American. I was just someone else coming in to tell their story. And one of the reasons they trusted me is because they understood that I also was very impacted by the 1882 exclusion law and by what happened to my family at the Angel Island Immigration Station. And, it's not something that I sat down and wrote a plan for. It happened serendipitously. It happened because I put out the energy and somebody picked up on that energy. And that's been the story of my creative life, is that things fall into my lap because I first thought it. When any of us do something as creatives or whatever, when we think something, it happens.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, Flo. Flo, can you talk about any misconceptions about being an artist?
Yes, plenty. Um, I was told that I wasn't going to be a successful uh, artist because I'm female and would have children. And that happened to me also when I went to my interviews to be hired as a school teacher. And when I went to HR in those school districts, well, no, we'll just hire you, and in 2 years you're going to have a baby, and then we'll have to hire someone else. And my sister-in-law King faced that as well, and I'm a few years younger, and that happened to me. Um, I didn't tell my parents that I was interested in being an artist, although I took violin lessons in high school. When I was in junior high school, my music teacher suggested that I sign up to learn how to play the oboe and join the school, orchestra. And I was a bit too conservative at the time. I didn't accept that. And I loved my violin lessons, but I had a teacher that hit my wrist every time I held the violin wrong. So even as well-meaning as many teachers are, sometimes they use techniques that really interfere and do not encourage students like myself and others who really have have the deep need to find a tool to let them speak. Um,
That's beautiful.
then I was really afraid at the beginning to tell Ed that I wanted a studio. It was time that I move out of my house. I used to make art, and my art pieces would be in the living room, the kitchen, the the dining room, and everywhere else. And there was very little place for Ed and my kids to move around because I took over the house with my art. And so finally, I bit the bullet, and I said, the city of Sunnyvale is renting, studios, but it's a competitive process. And I really need a studio, but I don't have the money because I was still teaching at that time. And I said, I'm afraid my teaching salary is not going to cover everything I need. And again, he was the one who said, no, this is fine. I'll cover the expenses. It's very important for artists to be aware of the talent that they might have within themselves, but it's also very necessary to be partners with a man or a woman or whoever else, um, who will understand why we have that drive to do what I like to do, what we want to do. Because by making art, we make the world beautiful. By making art, we create community. By making art, we encourage someone else to let their talent be seen and be respected. And it's a we're not we're not we're not telling them to sell drugs. We're not telling them to get guns to kill people. I tell my students when I teach art and poetry, the paper is your best friend. So if you want to beat someone up, use color, tools, design, and shapes, and do it on paper. And then when you're writing, something dastardly or just drastically awful happened to you, write it in a poem. You're not going to get arrested and be put in jail. People are going to come to a museum or a gallery and just say, "Oh my gosh."
Well,
And it's such a safe way to be. And safety is a big issue in our lives. And if we don't learn to be safe with ourselves and with others, we're in a lot of trouble.
yes, yes, completely agree, Flo. So if you give us so much hope. I think the fact that you have evolved in so many different ways over your years is just amazing. And I have two questions. One of them is for younger artists, what what advice would you provide parents to encourage their child's artistic interest in becoming a professional artist? Should they stay close? Should they help them along the way? Should they let them um, pursue things on their own? What would you recommend to
The
parents?
ideal scenario is be close, but don't impose and don't dominate. That's a tough one, especially if a parent is going to put out big money for ballet lessons or, piano lessons or, getting a master's degree or something. Um, and then give up the traditional thought in conservative Asian communities that your children have to do what you decide that they do. Not so. There is freedom within the family. And if you don't impose that freedom and you want to be the designer of their creative lives, it's counterproductive. It is, the children are not going to love you for the control that you're going to impose. And my advice to the parents, find a life of your own, get your own friends, do your own things, you know, take dance lessons, go to movies, write a movie or something, do something, sing, go take music lessons, song lessons, and, give yourself a life. And that's additional to the 9 to 4, jobs that we have. And now with 4 o'clock not being the closing time of a workday, you know, just take time to allow your children to be who they are, let them blossom. And like the lotus, they're gonna blossom for the day, they're gonna close up, they're gonna go back and nurture themselves, and then they're gonna blossom again the next day. Be a lotus yourself. And the lotus are some of the most beautiful flowers, and they float, and they bring joy to those of us who look at them. And we who become lotuses become sources of joy for ourselves and for the greater good.
Thank you, Flo. What gives you hope as an Asian American
What
artist?
gives me hope?
What gives you hope as an Asian?
Diversity and equality. Um, if there was understanding on part of males that women are equals and more so, and if they could put their male egos away and share and realize that women are not threats to them. We hold up more than half the world. We are the mothers of the global population. We can be presidents, we can be emperors or empresses, and not necessarily, to be fashioned in the style of these high energy people, but just as if their skin is the appropriate covering for what they have inside, and what they have inside feeds the beauty of their surface.
Thank you, Flo. Beautifully said. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your art.
Another suggestion I would have to parents is love yourselves. Love yourselves. When you love yourselves, you can love your children. You can love your grandchildren. You can love the ancestors who may or may not have understood who you are and who you wanted to be. We're in America, we're in a divided America, but America still offers hope and freedom, even with the madness that we're going through at this time.
Thank you for your honesty and your wisdom, Flo.